We're jumping straight into a look at significant LGBTQ plus news from around the world, focusing on the first quarter of 2025.
Right.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding some really key developments, both, positive steps and some deeply concerning setbacks. It's all drawn from recent reports.
And our mission really is just to give you a clear, concise picture of this, well, very dynamic landscape.
Exactly. And the sources, they're pretty varied this time.
Yeah, Associated Press, Human Rights Watch, Jurist, Memba Online, The Guardian, plus a statement from the Human Rights Campaign. It paints quite a picture.
It does. And looking at these chronologically seems like the best way to, well, make sense of it all.
Agreed. It helps see how things unfolded.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting in January 2025 in the U.S., the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, they put out an analysis pretty early on about the Trump administration's initial executive orders and their potential impact on the LGBTQ plus community. Right. And while these orders made headlines, HRC was quick to point out that, they aren't operating in a vacuum.
Exactly. Their power is limited by the U.S. Constitution, federal laws, existing legal precedent. It's not absolute.
So what were some of the specific actions they flagged?
Well, one big one was around federal gender markers, specifically on passports.
Ah, yes.
The directives aim to restrict people to using the sex assigned at birth. Now, they did say passports already issued with an X marker would be honored.
Okay, that's something.
But only until they expire. No new ones, no renewals with the X marker going forward. That creates immediate issues for trans and non-binary folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was the military ban.
Reinstated and actually expanded. The ban on transgender individuals serving.
Which impacts current service members and anyone hoping to enlist.
Precisely. It shifts focus away from, capability and onto discriminatory grounds. A big reversal.
Another one was the global gag rule. That came back too.
Yes, cutting U.S. funding for international organizations involved in reproductive health care.
And HRC specifically noted the disproportionate impact there.
They did. On LGBTQ plus people, particularly alongside women and girls, who often rely heavily on these specific organizations for essential health services, not just reproductive care.
Like HIV prevention and treatment, perhaps?
Exactly. Cutting funds has these wide ripple effects, hitting already vulnerable communities the hardest.
And domestically, healthcare was also targeted, specifically gender-affirming care.
Right. Directives aimed at preventing gender-affirming care for minors, anyone under 19.
How would that work?
Well, potentially removing coverage from federal health insurance, trying to change Affordable Care Act requirements, even stopping Medicare or Medicaid-funded providers from offering care like puberty blockers.
Wow, that's intervening quite directly in medical decisions.
Very directly, especially when medical consensus supports this kind of care. The potential harm to young people's well-being is, well, considerable.
And it didn't stop there, did it? Education was also mentioned.
Correct. Efforts to sort of discourage schools from affirming LGBTQ plus students.
Discourage how?
Even suggesting potential prosecution for teachers who are supportive.
Prosecution?
Yeah, that was part of the discussion, yes. And also a directive prohibiting transgender girls from participating in school sports aligned with their gender identity.
Creating a potentially very hostile environment in schools.
Definitely. Unwelcoming, unsafe. And the idea of going after teachers for just affirming students, that could really silence support.
But amidst all this, HRC also stressed that legal challenges were underway, right?
Yes, that's crucial. They emphasized that these orders aren't the final say. Legal challenges were mounted almost immediately.
Based on existing laws and the Constitution.
Exactly. Protections do exist. And importantly, implementing these orders takes time, and courts can, and sometimes do, block them.
So, a developing situation, legally speaking.
Very much so. These initial actions face significant hurdles.
Okay, let's move forward then into February 2025. We shift focus to Ghana.
Ah, yes. The reintroduction of the anti-gay bill, the Human Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill.
This wasn't entirely new, was it?
No, a previous version actually passed Parliament back in February 2024.
But it didn't become law.
Correct. The former president never signed it, so it expired. But now it's back.
And this time, with apparently broad support.
Unusual bipartisan support, yes, sponsored by 10 lawmakers, reportedly from both sides. That's concerning in itself.
And the current president, John Dramani Mahama.
He's openly backed it. There are quotes of him stating his belief in only two genders and defining marriage strictly between a man and a woman.
That kind of high-level endorsement really matters, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It can lend legitimacy to discriminatory views and legislation.
So what does the bill actually aim to do?
It's severe. It aims to criminalize not just sexual acts, but also any kind of advocacy or public support for LGBTQ plus rights.
And the penalties?
Prison time,
Huh.
6 months to 3 years for engaging in LGBTQ plus sexual acts, and even harsher, 3 to 5 years for promoting or supporting LGBTQ plus activities.
So simply being an advocate could land you in prison?
That's the clear intention. It basically aims to criminalize the community's existence and visibility. Support networks, activists, they'd be under constant threat.
Understandably, this has caused international alarm.
Huge concern. The World Bank, the IMF, the EU, they've all warned about potential economic fallout.
Fallout, like what?
Ghana's own finance ministry cautioned they could lose up to $3.8 billion just in World Bank funding.
That's a massive potential loss,
Oh, yeah.
especially given Ghana's economic situation.
It is. It puts the government in a tough spot weighing these purported cultural values against very concrete economic risks.
But not everyone in Ghana is swayed by those risks.
Apparently not. There was a report of a ruling party lawmaker basically dismissing the threat of sanctions,
On what ground?
suggesting the global landscape has shifted, specifically citing the return of the Trump administration in the U.S. The belief seems to be there's less pressure now, maybe even support for so-called family values.
Interesting how international politics plays into this.
It definitely emboldens certain actors.
Meanwhile, human rights groups are condemning it.
Strongly, calling it a major regression. And the fear within Ghana's LGBTQ plus community is palpable.
You mentioned a quote.
Yes, from a gay activist in Accra, basically saying he's considering fleeing the country if the bill passes. That tells you everything about the level of fear.
And this is happening in a wider context, right? In Africa?
Sadly, yes. Reports indicate rising homophobia across parts of the continent. Around 31 countries still criminalize homosexuality.
Which makes Ghana's situation even more disheartening given its past reputation.
Exactly. It was often seen as relatively more tolerant. This bill marks a significant negative shift. It really highlights how fragile progress can be.
A truly worrying situation there. Okay, let's move into March. March 15th, 2025. A very specific, troubling case involving the USA and El Salvador.
Yes, the deportation of Andre Jose Hernandez Romero.
He was a Venezuelan makeup artist seeking asylum in the U.S.
Correct. He cited persecution in Venezuela based on his sexual orientation and political views.
But instead of getting asylum, he was deported.
Deported and sent directly to a maximum security prison in El Salvador.
Why? What was the justification?
This is where it gets really concerning. U.S. authorities reportedly flagged his tattoos, specifically crown tattoos, as evidence of gang membership.
Gang membership.
They claimed affiliation with the Tren de Aragua gang.
But wasn't there another explanation for the tattoos?
Yes. In his Venezuelan hometown, Capacho, these crown tattoos are apparently a local tradition commemorating the Three Kings Day celebrations. He'd participated for years.
So, a complete cultural misunderstanding.
It certainly appears that way. An agent was quoted saying the crowns were consistent with those of a Tren de Aragua member. It shows a lack of awareness relying on very superficial, potentially wrong indicators.
His family and community must have been outraged.
Absolutely. They stressed his innocence, his long history with the Three Kings Day events. His lawyer also raised huge concerns about sending him, a vulnerable gay man, to a notoriously dangerous prison based on such flimsy evidence.
The risk in such a facility would be immense.
Alarmingly high, yes. Especially given his status as an asylum seeker and a member of the LGBTQ plus community.
What was the response from the U.S. administration?
Also deeply concerning, President Trump reportedly thanked El Salvador for taking in alleged Latin American criminals.
Alleged criminals? Based on tattoos.
And the White House press secretary apparently dismissed concerns about using tattoos in a point system to identify gang members.
Dismissed concerns about the system itself?
That was the report. It suggests a lack of regard for potential misidentification and, frankly, due process.
His lawyer used a very stark word to describe it.
Yes, disappearance. A truly chilling term. It really underscores the human cost when policies lack cultural sensitivity and prioritize speed over accuracy.
A stark reminder indeed. Okay, shifting continents now to Europe. March 18, 2025, in Hungary.
Right. Hungary's parliament passed a new law.
And this one targets pride events.
Effectively, yes. It bans LGBT pride and similar events. It's a major blow to freedom of assembly and expression there.
How does it work? It penalizes public support?
Yes, penalizes public support for LGBT people, curtails the right to assemble specifically around LGBT rights.
And there was something about technology being used.
Facial recognition technology, reportedly, authorized for authorities to identify organizers and even attendees.
To identify them for what?
Fines, up to €500, according to the reports.
It's like quite intimidating, using facial recognition on protesters.
It raises serious surveillance concerns, absolutely. A clear attempt to deter participation in peaceful demonstrations.
And the government's intent was clear.
The Prime Minister reportedly stated plainly that the law was intended to ban pride, and its adoption was very rapid.
Which drew criticism.
Yes, criticism about disregarding the rule of law, rushing it through without much scrutiny.
And this isn't the first such move in Hungary, is it?
No, it fits a pattern. It follows that 2021 law that banned the portrayal or promotion of LGBT content to children.
Using the protecting children argument again.
Exactly. That familiar rhetoric being deployed to justify discriminatory measures, it's a tactic seen globally, unfortunately.
Are there other related concerns in Hungary?
There are also pending constitutional changes mentioned. These would prioritize a child's proper physical, mental, and moral development above other rights.
Which could be used how?
Potentially to further restrict transgender people's rights based on this broad moral development clause.
But there's been pushback against this pride ban law.
Yes, widespread criticism. Protests reportedly happened in Budapest.
And the city's leadership.
The Lord Mayor explicitly stated that pride will happen anyway. A defiant stance.
International bodies have weighed in.
The Council of Europe's Human Rights Commissioner called for the president to veto the law. And there are calls for the EU Commission to step up, maybe launch new legal action against Hungary.
So resistance continues despite the law.
Definitely. The fight isn't over there, despite this significant setback.
Okay, let's look at March 25, 2025. Two very different legal developments on the same day. First, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, a disappointing one here. The Court of Appeal reversed a really historic High Court ruling.
The one that had decriminalized same-sex intimacy.
That's the one. So the Court of Appeal essentially reinstated the old colonial-era sodomy laws. Same-sex intimacy is criminalized there once again.
But the High Court had found those laws unconstitutional back in 2018.
It had. And interestingly, the Court of Appeal actually acknowledged that the laws are, quote, not reasonably justifiable today.
So why reinstate them?
They cited the country's savings law clause.
What's that?
It's a constitutional provision that essentially shields certain laws, specifically those inherited from the colonial era, from being struck down on constitutional grounds.
So an old law trumps current rights interpretations.
In effect, yes. Outright International strongly condemned it, pointing out how these savings clauses are used to avoid human rights obligations.
Is there any way around this clause?
The activist who brought the original challenge, Jason Jones, is calling for constitutional reform to get rid of or amend the savings law itself.
Was the decision unanimous in the Court of Appeal?
No, there was apparently a dissenting judgment that criticized relying on these old laws, calling it a matter of human rights illegitimacy.
So the next step is Parliament.
Outright International is urging Parliament to act to repeal the discriminatory laws legislatively, since the court felt bound by the savings clause.
A complex legal battle there. Now, same day, March 25, but a different outcome in Japan.
Yes, a much more positive development here. The Osaka High Court ruled that Japan's failure to recognize same-sex marriage is unconstitutional.
And this isn't the first Japanese court to say this.
No, it's actually the fifth High Court ruling to find the lack of marriage equality unconstitutional, following similar decisions in Sapporo, Tokyo, Fukuoka, and Nagoya.
So a growing trend in the judiciary. Did the couples win damages?
Reportedly, the court denied their claim for financial damages, but the core ruling on unconstitutionality is the major takeaway.
What specific parts of the Constitution did they cite?
Article 14, the right to equality. And Article 24, which deals with marriage, individual dignity, and the essential equality of the sexes in family life. The court found the current Civil Code and Family Register Act violate both.
And this case came from?
It was filed back in 2019 by 3 same-sex couples. They were part of a larger, coordinated effort across Japan, about 14 couples filing similar suits.
And Japan still stands out among G7 nations on this.
It does. It's the only G7 country that doesn't legally recognize same-sex marriage at the national level.
So these court rulings are putting pressure on the government.
Significant pressure. Human Rights Watch, local LGBTQ plus groups, they're amplifying calls for the Diet, Japan's parliament, to finally act and legalize same-sex marriage.
What about those partnership certificates we sometimes hear about?
They exist in some municipalities, yes. They offer some limited rights, which is better than nothing.
But not full marriage.
No, not even close. They don't cover things like inheritance, spousal visas, or often even hospital visitation rights in the same way marriage does. So these court rulings emphasize that partnership systems aren't enough for true equality.
Right. A significant legal push there.
Definitely a positive trajectory in the Japanese courts.
So that brings us through the first quarter. As you can see, quite a mixed bag.
Absolutely.
You've now had a focused look at some major LGBTQ plus news. We've seen genuine steps forward, like that ruling in Japan.
Definitely a bright spot.
But also these deeply concerning regressions. Hungary, Trinidad and Tobago, the situation in Ghana, that really awful deportation case involving the U.S.
And this really underscores how uneven progress is globally. Rights can advance in one place while being severely rolled back in another, sometimes simultaneously.
And hopefully this deep dive gives you, our listener, a solid snapshot of this complex evolving landscape, hitting the key points without getting totally lost in the weeds.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How domestic politics, international relations, legal battles, they all intertwine to shape the reality for LGBTQ plus people worldwide. It's never just one thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So considering these varied developments we've just discussed, the legal wins, the increased restrictions, the political shifts, what do you see as the most pressing challenges and maybe the opportunities for LGBTQ plus rights globally in the years ahead? It's clearly a conversation that's far from over.
Indeed. And staying aware, staying engaged, that's crucial as this continues to unfold.